Hi, this is Heather at Straddle Parenting. One of the biggest challenges for homeschooling parents with a wide range of ages is getting it all done. And by it, of course, I mean school. We take seriously our responsibility to facilitate the education of our kids, and when it falls flat, or when we think we're not doing enough, we start to panic. That panic usually leads us to pile on more work, which makes it less likely that we can get it all done, and you get the point, right? Homeschooling high school and preschool, especially at the same time, is a challenge. Changing diapers while you're teaching economics is a stretch. But I'm here to tell you it can be done. And guess what? You might even still be sane when it's all over. Although, to be honest, I cannot guarantee that. So here we go, digging into our first podcast in a series on straddle parenting, homeschool style. Today we're going to start at the top and talk about the really scary part, high school. I still remember when high school seemed really far away and really intimidating. I was sitting there with my sweet little stair steps, all under 8 years old, and I was loving the freedom of reading aloud and making balloon and straw models of lungs. But if I thought too hard about it, I'd get just the slightest bit freaked out because I knew that what I was doing at home did not line up with what was happening in the classrooms down the hill. And if those were the kids that colleges were looking for, what were they going to make of my kids, who spent part of their day digging World War II trenches in the backyard? Were my kids going to make the cut? I really didn't know. I read in books and blogs that colleges were becoming more receptive to homeschoolers. My mind was even softening to the possibility that maybe some of my kids wouldn't go to college at all, but would rather follow a different path into adulthood. But I didn't actually know anyone who had graduated a child from their homeschool. I didn't even know anyone actually homeschooling a high schooler, so it was all abstract to me. What I really wanted was to sit down with a homeschool graduate and talk to them. I wanted to ask the parents questions, but what I really wanted was to hear from that young adult exactly what had worked and what hadn't worked about their teen years of being homeschooled. But at the time, the opportunity just didn't exist. Well, today I'm going to give all of you the opportunity I wished I'd had. I am honored to introduce my daughter, Mary Hannah. Hi, Mary Hannah.
Hi, Mom.
Mary Hannah's 18, and she graduated from our homeschool 2 years ago. That means you were 16, right?
Yes, that is correct.
So we're going to talk a little bit about that later. But first, why don't you tell us about your current academic endeavors?
I am currently studying to be a CPM, a Certified Professional Midwife, through Mercy in Action College of Midwifery. And on the side, I'm also studying for my doula certification.
And this whole course of study will take you how long?
Should take me about 3 years.
So what's next? What are you going to do with that?
I plan to take the skills that I've learned and take them to Nepal and work in the rural areas and towards the west of Nepal, where there are very, very few health opportunities for women.
So that means that, God willing, you're going to be on the field at 21, 22, right?
God willing, yes.
All right, so let's go back. I was pretty nervous when you started high school. The stakes seemed higher, like I might somehow screw it up and you'd be mad at me your whole life. Were you nervous?
I think I was a little bit, but more than anything, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. High school was kind of a big thing of when you were in middle school, you were so close to being kind of the almost an adult. And so I was excited about that, but I didn't really realize what being in high school fully meant. So nervous, maybe a little, but not really.
So from the start, your high school career was not what you would have found in the halls of most brick and mortar schools. Did you know that? I mean, were you aware of the differences?
I was. I think I was. Most of the time, I don't think that ever bothered me, though, because I was so used to being kind of, like you said, not the brick and mortar homeschooler because I was homeschooled. Yeah, sometimes I realized I was different. And actually, as I got older, I started to worry a little bit about, well, I'm having so much fun doing school. Does this actually count for school since I'm having so much fun?
Right.
I thought high school wasn't supposed to be fun. So I have a question for you then.
Okay.
What process did you have to go through in order to afford me that tailored to my quote-unquote career education? All I ever saw was the final product that you gave me. I never understood what you had to do to compile all that to give me that education.
That's a good question. So I started out probably when you were maybe in 7th grade, maybe 6th. I pulled up, we lived in Washington State at the time, so I pulled up the requirements that were online available, and I looked and saw what all the credits were. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember. I think it was maybe 19 hours that you needed, maybe 20. I can't remember. But I took that list, mm-hmm. and I took the list of, she needs 3 credits of math. She needs, 2 credits of an elective that might be a foreign language. And I used that as my starting point. But then I kind of had to get a little bit more liberal in my thinking because this was, I don't know, by the time you started, it was like 2011. And one of the books that was really shaping my thinking right around that time was Oliver DeMille's A Thomas Jefferson Education. Another one was Homeschooling for Excellence by David Colfax. There were some others, but that was really where my mind was going. I had had a pretty miserable high school experience that I felt left me unprepared for college, let alone a life, and I wanted something more for you. So I was looking for a practical way to give you access to the tools that you needed in your heart and your mind and your soul for the life that God had planned for you, whatever that was. So really that list of credits was the starting point, but I knew that the people that made up that list didn't know you, and they didn't know what it was that you were created to do. Mm-hmm. And really, chances were they didn't know God. So that it was just that. It was just a jumping off point. So from there, I really had to do a lot of prayer. I had to do a lot of talking with your dad and talking with you. I don't know if you remember some of the conversations we had, but it was a lot of, so what do you think? What kind of things interest you? What do you think is a passion? What would you like to spend your time doing? And then you said midwifery, and we just kind of had our trajectory. Right after that, I think you went to your first birth, right? Baby Abigail?
I think so. I think that was right after I was starting to think, maybe midwifery is the way to go. And then I went to Baby Abigail's birth, and I was like, yes, this is exactly what I want to do. But what were your thoughts when I first said, I want to study midwifery, or at least I think I do? What was going through your head as the mom?
I guess the biggest thing was I kind of looked backward in that moment, and I thought, okay, so midwifery, medical type field. Have I given this kid enough of a science background? Have I given this kid enough to go on in that direction? Because as much as I automatically saw in you that you were a nurturer, that you were a person who's good in an emergency, I saw all of these things in you. I'm looking at the work that I've done with you and thinking, all right, so what does she need? How do we make that list that we started with, those, nebulous 19, 20 credits, how do we make that look like? And at the end of this time period, you come out ready to walk into a more formalized setting to learn the skills that are going to help people have the births that they want safely and in a way that is honoring God.
Here's a random question I just thought of. Were you ever disappointed when I said I wanted to study midwifery? Like, oh, my daughter doesn't want to be a lawyer or a doctor, a full doctor. She just wants to be a midwife. Was that ever like a disappointing thing for you?
Oh my
were you
goodness.
just...
No, ever, not ever. As a matter of fact, I mean, I can honestly say that if one of you guys said, you know, what I really want to do is collect trash, I would say, rock on. That is awesome. Because I think that whatever God created you to do, it is imperative that you do the work and you do it with all your might for his glory. And the fact that you were able to articulate to me and say, you know, I think midwifery, I was like, wow, that actually just made sense. Because I could look back in all of your years, you know, you had done 4-H for years, and you had had all of these experiences that I knew were going to lend themselves really well to midwifery. And I could look back then, and sometimes God does give you that hindsight. I could look back with that 2020 and go, oh, see, that wasn't actually about raising a rabbit or being a vet. Right. It wasn't about any of that. It was about this next step forward and saying, okay, yeah, no, I was never disappointed. I was never anything but thrilled for you and excited to watch and see how it all kind of turned out. So from that point, I just remember high school for you was about crafting this body of information that was both really general, like, you know, okay, you should probably read A Scarlet Letter because everybody reads A Scarlet Letter, but also really specific. So, you know, with A Scarlet Letter, I'm sitting here thinking about your reading list. You spent a lot of time reading in high school.
I did. I kind of discovered books at a whole new level. I discovered a lot of classics. I was old enough to finally start reading things like Moby Dick or Huckleberry Finn. And so I ended up bringing a lot of those home from the library. I discovered that I really, really, really love Jack London.
Mm-hmm. I remember that.
I think I've read like 3 of his books. I read Call of the Wild, and then, of course, I went back and I got White Fang, and then I got The Sea Wolf, and then... but then I also read a lot of fantasy as well. That's kind of my happy spot. Mm-hmm. So I did. I enjoyed reading a lot, and I was able to kind of pursue that.
Because you had the time.
Because I had the time, yeah. Which I did not expect I was going to have in high school.
Right. So your science, too, was kind of the same way. It was general in that you had to take chemistry.
Yes, I did.
But it was also really specific because I remember human anatomy was a huge thing.
It was, yeah. I did advanced biology, and then I had to do specific anatomy for the female reproductive system, and then I had to do, like, you know, neonatal anatomy and stuff. And so I read textbooks on that as well.
Right. And you also did the doula class.
Yes,
At that point. That was a big part of your high school. That was 2013.
Yes, I was 15. I got a lot of odd looks that, what, you're 15 and you're doing doula work already?
Right, because we contacted the university and they were open. They'd had a positive relationship actually with another homeschool family that we knew of. The Bergerons. And they were really open to you coming. And so that was part of your curriculum that year.
Yeah, that included anatomy, and then it included general massage techniques, birthing positions, kind of just a basic gist of how do you help a woman through labor.
Right.
So it was kind of the beginning foundation for all the other stuff that I would be studying through the year.
Right. And that doesn't show up in those credits.
Well, yeah, it wouldn't.
No, it didn't. So if I remember correctly, we tracked how much time you spent. And that ended up being a health credit for you because it was, you could do PE or health education, and that was a health education. And then I think we lumped part of it then back in with anatomy.
So for general high school as well, math, history, etc., there's one way the public school does things, but like you said earlier, you've never been the mother to say, well, that's just how the public school does it, so that's just how we're going to do it. You've always said, well, that might not be right for my child. I mean, I remember when I was maybe 10, we went and we started math all over again for me because I was just having such a hard time with math.
Right.
How did you decide, within legal regulations, obviously, what to include, what not to include, what to do a little differently. Well, so getting all my requirements done in high school, because it's a different thing in high school. Things count a little more.
They do. How do we... I think because, at least in Washington State, it was so open-ended, to say you need a life science credit. Now, there are some states where it's a lot more specific, where they will say, you need an earth science, and it can't be, astronomy. Or you need a science that can't be a classical astronomy. It has to be more of a hands-on astronomy. Because we had this really general framework from the state, it was a lot easier to fit a lot of those things in. That really, for me, made it a lot easier, I think, when it came transcript time. I never felt like I was stretching it to, I've heard of people saying, well, I'm going to count mowing the lawn as PE, and I didn't have to do that because we did have really generalized, requirements. And there really wasn't anything that I objected to in those requirements that I had to drop. Not that it would have mattered for you, but there were no sex ed requirements. I mean, right? Because you got the full
I got
on.
that.
You got that. You got the sex ed requirements. But there wasn't anything like that. So it was a lot easier, I think, than it would be in some areas.
Like, say, North Carolina, for
right,
instance.
Right. The North Carolina rules are a little bit more structured than they were. Yeah. But I'm just curious. So spiritually in that time, for you, was it a fruitful time? I mean, you were pursuing what it was that you knew you needed to start preparation for. How did it feel?
I think it was kind of like, not to be using kind of a bad analogy, but almost like you've been walking around in a dark room and then you turn on the light and you're like, oh, that's what I was stumbling around. Not that I was stumbling over anything, but it was kind of like, oh, so that's what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I think I just felt really special at the fact that God had said, yes, this is what you are supposed to do. I guess I just assumed I was going to get out of high school and be like, okay, now what?
Right.
And just kind of go to college. Maybe I don't think I had actually even planned to go to college. I just wanted to be a mom.
So this gave you kind of a purpose.
It did. It gave me a direction. And I remember being so excited and just wanting to get as much of it as I could because I knew this is what I'm doing. Okay, well, let me get as much of this as I can, and just reveling in the fact that, wow, God has a purpose for me.
Right. And you've done an excellent job, I think, as you've gotten older and as you've gotten out of high school, of still grabbing onto that. In moments when you do, like everybody else, grapple with faith, you can say that you have purpose, and you started that purpose in high school rather than this year I have to take English 1 and I have to read these books and I have to do this. You were able to say, I think I see where God's leading me.
Yes.
And I'm going to start on that path. Kind of that, the classic Awana verse. Let no one look down on you.
Because you are young.
Right. Exactly.
You said that before we started the high school journey together, you were kind of afraid you were going to screw up. Once you started with me, though, did you ever actually feel like you'd failed me at all?
I questioned a lot the decision not to have you take the SAT or an ACT. And I really wrestled with that in terms of the fact that it was what everyone did. And
it was what my friends did.
Yeah. I wrestled with that, but at the same time, I sat there and said, she's so purposefully driven in this one direction. And we know, you already knew where you wanted to apply and what they required. And so I did kind of sit there sometimes in fear. What if she gets to be a senior and she completely changes her mind and we haven't done all this stuff and we've spent all of these years investing in this one thing? But as I look at it now, it really, I think you always have to question and you always have to keep checking yourself. I think that was kind of a temptation, not of the Lord, to just question what I really was called to do and what I'd been asked to do. I was out of the boat. I couldn't get back into the boat.
No, you couldn't.
I couldn't take back those years by the time that, they were water under the bridge. And it was just kind of questioning, well, is God going to be faithful? Mm-hmm. Really, that's what it really was. Is God going to be faithful?
Yeah.
And after that, aside from that, I felt like we did a lot of talking, and I knew we were okay.
Yeah. In high school, like you were saying, like the talking, you were kind of less, for lack of a better word, involved in my schooling.
Right.
Because I was old enough that I could manage my own time.
And I wasn't teaching your doula classes.
No, you weren't.
Right.
I was doing those, online, or I was doing them on campus at Bastyr University.
Right.
And any schoolwork I did at the house, like English, writing papers, American literature, I just turned those into you at the end of the week.
Right. I was not holding your hand through
Right.
those.
Because I could kind of go through it, and it was training for college of going, okay, now you have to get this all done.
Right.
And how do you do it? But how did you know when I was doing well, when things were a little rough, so you could do something? I mean, looking at a grade is one thing, right? I was getting A's, but there were definitely several points where I started struggling. How did you figure out that I was?
I think that we were close enough, and I maintained a close enough tie and conversation with you. While you may have been, sitting at the table working on a paper, and I was over in the corner nursing a baby, I wasn't not part of the picture. And we were still talking a lot.
Yes.
A lot. Especially, like, for example, when you were going through your American Lit, and I had written that course for you, and we had so much dialogue happening. And you have always been a person that when you've discovered things, like when you were doing your sciences and when you were doing this other stuff that I was not actively involved in, I knew about it. You were vocal. I knew about it. I knew what was happening. It's not like you were coming home after a long day of class, dropping a bunch of books on the table, slumping down at the table, and then me saying, so how was your day? And you going, fine.
Can I go take a nap?
Right. That just wasn't happening because there was always such a give and take. It was always part of our lives. So when things got rough, I knew that things were getting rough. The biggest thing I'm thinking about was math.
Yes.
Because you never loved math. You've never loved math.
No, I never have.
And I've never had you walking in and go, I just made the most amazing mathematical discovery. It hasn't happened yet.
Usually it's, Mom!
Right.
They just asked me to do this!
Right, exactly. But, I saw you sitting there doing your work. I saw your body posture. And you would come to me. You'd go, I don't get this. And so, it wasn't a fact of, like you said, figuring out that things were getting rough. It was, okay, it's getting rough now, right? And you would communicate that back. Yes, it's getting rough. Okay, so what can we do? We did a lot of working together.
Yeah.
We did a lot of working together to kind of get you through that.
Yeah, and I know a lot of high schoolers actually who their moms are not as involved as you were. And I am so grateful for the amount of time that you invested in me, because I really feel like even though you feel like it takes more out of you to teach a toddler, it's almost like high schoolers are kind of toddlers. They need you to hold their hand, but they also need you to kind of let go and be like, okay, now you can walk.
Well, and that's a big reason why our high schoolers don't do their work in their bedroom.
Yeah.
That honestly, that's a big reason why our high schoolers don't do their work in their bedroom. Because while it may be a distraction having the little guys running around, it's important for me to see that body language going on. It's important for me to be able to walk by, put my hand on your shoulder, look over your shoulder and say, hey, how's it going? What are you thinking? It's important for us to rub up against each other at the sink in a random moment and say, okay, so you're reading To Kill a Mockingbird. What part are you at? Okay, so what do you think? Atticus is 8 kinds of awesome, right? It's important. That kind of thing is so important. So even if I am not actively sitting down and teaching you, I need to be a part of what's going on. So, yeah. So there you are. You're 16 and a half. And I remember us sitting down.
Yeah, we were just trying to see how many credits I had.
And we realized, we go, wait, you've got more than enough credits to graduate. You can be done because we've checked all the boxes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that.
So you graduated.
I did. A big part of the conversation I remember was, I'm done. Why do I need to stay in school? If I'm done, I'm just going to be, it's kind of overkill at this point. If I've already learned everything I need to learn, then why stay in school another year and a half? And also, we were moving to Nepal at the time, and I really, really, really wanted, since I had the opportunity, I wanted to graduate with my friends.
Right.
And I ended up graduating before all of my friends.
Right.
But I was able to have them all over and have them all celebrate with me the fact that I was done. And that was also very important to me.
Yeah, yeah. So we graduated you, and then you actually had a full year.
I took a full year off, and I do not regret that one bit.
Because you spent that time, you did music theory.
I did some music theory. I did economics. I kind of just took a year and helped you.
Yeah, yeah.
Helped us get settled in Nepal, and then just kind of studied things that I wanted to. I actually even took a break off of midwifery stuff for a year. And I did music theory, and I did like an economics course because economics sounds interesting. Let's do that.
So the year goes by. You put in your application to the school that you've always dreamed of going to, Mercy in Action, and then you get into the program. And here's the big question. Were you prepared? I mean, this is the thing really that people want to know. Did it work? Did homeschooling work?
I would say yes. Like any other new freshman in college, orientation week, a little scary. I got there and they were like, okay, so now you're going to be doing this, 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 and this. And I thought to myself, oh my, this is way more work than high school. And so yeah, the first couple weeks, it was a little scary, but I had to kind of realize that it was the same as high school. I was still doing the work. I was still doing it without somebody holding my hand. And I had to remind myself, oh, well, you just have to plan your time accordingly. And so once I got that, it was excellent. And I got all my work done. I got days off, and yeah, it worked, I would say.
So looking back, would you change anything? I mean, would you say, oh, I really needed to learn that, or that particular thing that we spent a lot of time on was a waste, or I wish you would have dealt with this way?
No, I really can't think of anything that I can look back and go, well, I needed to learn that. Unless, of course, you want to go back in time and say, instead of spending your time reading that fantasy book, you could be reading another midwifery textbook. And then when it comes to that one test, Module 13, you won't be like, what? No, it's true.
I couldn't do that for you.
No, you couldn't do that for me. But was anything a waste? I mean, even the math wasn't a waste because it's just general knowledge. And it's just generally good stuff to have in hand. Maybe you never use it in your career, but it's still a good idea to have that. If anything, at the least, it makes you at least feel as smart as your brother who's doing high schools.
So, all right, litmus test. Would you homeschool your kids? Do you believe it's something worthy of investing the limited time that God's given you? What do you think?
I would say so. I would say it's worth it because I know that I can guarantee that I have a relationship with them. They have a relationship with me. I can help them prepare to go out and work for the Lord in the way that they want to, that they feel called to. And I can help them prepare for that because I have, 12 years of school to help them get ready and help them tailor their education in the same way that you helped me. So yes, I would absolutely homeschool my own kids.
All right, so hey, I get to look forward to having homeschool grandkids. All right, if I had known that back when we started that you were going to feel that way, I probably would have been much more confident. And hopefully the folks listening can now go forward with a little more assurance that they can do it too. You can homeschool high school, and with God's grace, you can even enjoy it. You enjoy it, Mariana?
I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it. Honestly, I love homeschooling high school. All right, thank you so much for listening. Have a very, very blessed day.